The Spotlight, shining a light on podcasts and videos that have caught our attention.
Hi and welcome to The Spotlight. My name is Jen Spiker and today I'm highlighting more of a recent conversation that Phil Edwards had with his guest co-host on Sunday Morning Together. As the name suggests, Sunday Morning Together is heard every Sunday on Vision and available on demand in the Vision app. Each week, Phil spends time unpacking his guests' stories, including their faith journey. A recent guest co-host on Sunday Morning Together was Pastor Danny Guglielmucci, and we pick up the conversation where Danny shares about his conversion.
The Spotlight with Jen Spiker.
How old were you and what happened that you had that encounter?
I was about 11 years old where I used to have to go everywhere my parents would take me. My dad pioneered a church in Adelaide and he was a pastor, and they had prayer meetings on Saturday night and we would go to the church and I was just a kid, and one particular night in one of the prayer meetings, I was just drawing pictures on a piece of paper. I was bored. I didn't want to be there. And then there was just an instant where I literally felt overpowered by God's love and felt the sense that God was present and felt that he was interested in me. And I remember just breaking down and crying, and my mum told me that I cried myself to sleep that night, and I ended up worshipping God and singing in my bedroom. And I really would say that was my moment of conversion without even realizing it. And from then on, I became so God conscious that I started to want to do God's things rather than run with my secular mates that were trying to pull me into their way of life,
That's fascinating. So you're bored, scribbling on paper, and you have an encounter with God.
Yeah, amazing.
How do you explain that?
I just think God knew my heart, and I think I used to sit in church and cry when my dad used to preach, even as a little kid. At the age of 10, age at 9, there was always a drawing. There was something that on the inside I felt that the whole God story was real. And yet I also wanted to fit in. So I was the best bad joke teller at school. I compromised what I was hearing at church because I wanted to fit in with my non-Christian mates. And I was raised in a very traditional religious home where there wasn't any celebration of Christmas or Easter. It was quite what we would today call a legalistic expression of the Bible. And so it was rules and regulations. And so in order to fit in at school, I would lie. And I would say, I got this present for Christmas when I really didn't. I learned to lie to fit in. And so I had this sort of dual life. I was at school trying to fit in. And then when I was at church, I was warm towards the things of God. And I think God just knew my heart and just touched me at that time. And then from then on, I was able to connect with a Christian school group at lunchtime that used to meet at the school. And I started to go to that. And because I was a bit musical and I could play the guitar, they asked me to play for the choruses at the Inter-School Christian Fellowship and started to find a connection with some Christian young people. And my life then started to go down that trajectory. Yeah.
You're one of many I've heard talk about ISCF.
Yes.
And in fact, even myself at school, there was an ISCF group. We had another thing called FISH, Fellowship in School Hours.
Yes.
So anybody who's been part of that, be encouraged that you've planted good seeds into the lives of people like myself and Pastor Danny over the years. But I'm guessing that took you on a different trajectory because here you are today. You had been in ministry for many years. You founded a church yourself and many other things where God has used you. How did that play out for you in the teen and say early 20 years when you're trying to figure out your direction?
Yeah. So at the age of 16, I met some Christian young men from what today would be called Futures Church. It was Paradise Assembly of God Church back in Adelaide. And they had a singing group and I played guitar. And so I joined that group. They invited me to join the group. And so I joined a gospel singing group. And in that, I ended up going to what was then the Paradise Assembly of God Church, where I actually walked into a time in history where there was quite a move amongst teenagers, young people. There was a refreshing sense of live Christianity. And I found I came into this environment that I felt, this is me. This is where I fit. And so in that environment, the beautiful pressure, the positive peer pressure of being in that environment just drew me closer and closer to Jesus. And through that ministry, I then became involved in the youth group. Later got married to a young lady in that church. And then we opened our home to have young people come, and what we would call today like a home group. And that took off. We ended up having over 200 young people in a 12-month period come through our home. They didn't all come at once. They came through our home, and we started other connect groups where Four Corners in Adelaide, in the ABC Four Corners program, came to Adelaide one time to film on why young people were turning away from what the world had to offer and what they called turn to religion. And so there was something of a call of God working on our lives even way back then that just kept evolving and evolving. Later, I became a youth pastor in that church, and the rest is history. Yeah.
A few moments ago, Danny, you mentioned a young lady who you would go on to marry. Her name is Sharon, as I understand, and you're celebrating a little milestone this year.
Yes, this year will be 50 years married.
Oh, congratulations.
I said to a church the other day that for our 50th anniversary, I'm taking her to Italy, but for our 55th, I'm going to go and get her back. And so everybody thought that was quite funny.
Everybody but her?
Yeah, I got booed.
That's very funny. So, together you've produced 3 children, 7 grandchildren, but it's been a pretty rocky road at times, hasn't it, for you and Sharon?
Yes, it has. Yes. I think our middle son, Michael, who many listening to me today would be aware, he was a wonderful young man that wrote some amazing songs. He had an incredible gift on his life, and he was involved in many of the ministries across our country, Planet Shakers. He was at Hillsong for a while. He was involved in many of those contemporary churches that had a lot of impact on young people. And he certainly was a lover of people, lover of worship, and he was a great kid, but there was a brokenness inside of him, which he openly shares today, his story, a brokenness inside of him and mental health issues and a whole lot of issues that my wife and I were not aware of that brought him to a place of deep deception, convinced that he was dying of cancer, but he wasn't. And so it's a lot of hurtful, painful journey that was for all of us to know. We didn't even know that was happening inside his life, all kinds of addictive situations. And so we felt this would never be the same again. We felt, obviously, as parents, where did we go wrong? Were we too... did we have too many expectations on our kids? We didn't think we did, and I'm sure we didn't. But you self-evaluate and think, where did we go wrong in all this? And he went on a 10-year journey that broke our hearts and broke his heart, and we never thought we would end up in a place like that. But I can honestly say to everybody listening today that he took deep ownership of all that brokenness, went and got help, and over a 10-year period of restoration, today that young man is running a charity in Adelaide, feeding the poor in our city, lives totally by faith, kept his marriage, his wife has 3 children, and they prepare over 7,000 meals a week. They are feeding thousands of people off the streets, people that live in their cars, people that are broken, and he shares Jesus with them, but shares his story of his brokenness and how God could take such a mess and heal it. So through all that pain, the story has ended up in a place of God's amazing grace, God's amazing grace to take the lowest of lowest and restore. And so we've seen a turnaround, but the pain was deep. I tell you, Phil, the pain was really deep.
Yeah, it's a great example of how God uses cracked pots, and sometimes we need to be cracked in order to relate to other people who are also hurting, and for God to take, deal with our own pride and all sorts of things in our lives. Yeah, and it's very easy. Yeah. Here we stand, and you're able to look back at that time and look at the journey that has happened since then and how God has worked and what God is doing now. But when you're in the thick of it, it is very different when you can't see what is happening. And I can imagine, often when people are in the limelight, we don't tend to think about their others, their mother, father, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, who are also affected.
On the Spotlight, we've been listening to part of a heartfelt conversation between Vision CEO Phil Edwards and Pastor Danny Guglielmucci from a recent Sunday morning together. We'll hear more of Pastor Danny's story next time, but if you can't wait, you can hear the conversation in full, plus Danny's communion message and 5-minute sermon by tapping the podcast tab of the Vision app. Just search for Sunday Morning Together to find this and many more episodes. My name is Jen Spiker. Join me next time on The Spotlight as we hear Pastor Danny Guglielmucci share how the Lord carried him through this painful season.
For more great podcasts and videos like the one featured today, check out vision.org.au or the free Vision app.